Welcome to the Monsters Among Us podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 18, the Belgium UFO Wave. So back in 1989 and rolling into 1990, something really bizarre was happening over Belgium.
Yeah, it was quite a period.
We're talking thousands of people.
Yeah.
And not just, average Joes looking up. We're talking police officers, military folks.
Trained observers.
Exactly. All reporting these huge silent objects, usually triangular shaped.
Right. Large, dark, often triangular with lights underneath.
Yeah.
And completely silent, according to most witnesses. That was the common description.
And these weren't just quick glances either. People were watching these things for sustained periods. It really gripped the country.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the credibility of the witnesses. When you have police gendarmes filing reports, military radar operators tracking unknowns, well, it definitely elevates it beyond your typical UFO flap.
For sure. And it wasn't just people on the ground or even just radar operators.
Yeah.
The Belgian Air Force actually scrambled F-16s, fighter jets.
They did, which tells you how seriously they were taking these reports at an official level.
So, yeah, that's what we're diving into today. What did people actually see? What did the investigations find? Or maybe what didn't they find? Because, decades later, there's still so many questions.
There really are. It's a fascinating case.
Okay, so let's unpack it. Where did it all begin?
Well, the first sort of cluster of sightings really kicked off in November 1989. People started reporting these large, low-flying objects, again, often flat, triangular, lights underneath.
Okay.
But it's worth pointing out that a lot of those initial reports, they were actually filed like weeks after the sighting supposedly happened.
Oh. So memory could be a bit fuzzy, perhaps.
It's always a factor, isn't it? Recollection after significant delay, things can get distorted. But things really ramped up later.
Right. The peak of it all was that night in March 1990, March 30th.
Exactly. March 30th, 1990. That night was, well, pivotal. You had the Military's Control Reporting Center, the CRC at Glons.
That's like military air traffic control.
Pretty much, yeah. They started tracking an unidentified object on their radar. At the same time, they were getting reports on the ground. 3 unusual lights seen moving towards Dornbeek-en-Bleu, that's southeast of Brussels.
Okay, so radar and eyes on the ground, maybe seeing the same thing.
That's what it looked like initially. The CRC actually called the local gendarmerie, the police in Wavre, and asked them, hey, can you go check this out? Confirm these lights.
So they're trying to correlate the data points. Makes sense.
It does. And then, get this, about 10 minutes later, more reports came in. A second set of lights, apparently moving towards the first group, forming that triangle shape people had described.
Oh, okay.
And it wasn't just the military radar. The Civilian Air Traffic Control Center at Semmerzak also logged an object on their radar screen.
So multiple radar systems tracking something?
Something. This combination of ground reports and radar hits, that's what triggered the decision. Scramble 2 F-16s from Beauvechain Air Base.
Fighter jets. I mean, that's a serious response. What did the pilots find? Did they see these triangles?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. And maybe a bit anticlimactic.
Oh.
Over the next hour, those F-16s made 9 separate attempts to intercept whatever was showing up on radar. 9 times.
Huh.
And on 3 of those attempts, they did get a radar lock. Briefly.
Ah, so they locked onto something.
They did. But later analysis concluded those locks were actually on each other. The 2 F-16s had locked onto their wingman.
Oh. Not quite the smoking gun, then.
Not at all. And crucially, the pilots themselves, they reported never seeing any unusual objects. They didn't witness any strange maneuvers, nothing beyond their own aircraft.
So visually, nothing confirmed by the pilots in these advanced jets.
Correct. And the other radar contacts, the ones the F-16s didn't lock onto, those were largely attributed to something called Bragg scattering.
Bragg scattering, what's that?
It's basically a type of atmospheric interference. Changes in humidity or temperature can sometimes create echoes on radar screens that look like solid objects but aren't. False positives, essentially.
Okay, so the ground radar saw things, but the F-16s couldn't confirm anything visually, and their own radar locks were on each other, with other contacts likely being atmospheric glitches.
That seems to be the official assessment from the Air Force side of things regarding the intercepts, yes. The final confirmed lock, which was likely one F-16 on the other, was around 12:40 a.m., and the jets returned to base shortly after 1:20 a.m.
What about the police on the ground? The Wavre gendarmerie who were asked to look. Did they see anything?
They did file a report. They described seeing 4 lights, initially in a square formation.
4 lights, not 3. A square, not a triangle.
According to their report, yes. They also noted the lights made short, sort of jerky movements. Then they gradually dimmed and vanished in 4 separate directions around 1:30 a.m.
Huh. Jerky movements.
And interestingly, they also mentioned hearing a low engine noise and seeing something that looked like a stick with a turbine.
Like stick with a turbine, that sounds almost like a helicopter rotor.
That's what some interpretations suggest, yes. That maybe what the police saw and heard was actually a helicopter, despite the unusual light configuration they described.
So we have conflicting accounts even from that key night. Military radar with explainable contacts, pilots seeing nothing, police seeing jerky lights and hearing an engine. It's messy.
Very messy. And the situation got even more complicated about a month later, in April 1990.
How so?
That's when the photograph emerged. The one everyone thinks of when you mention the Belgian UFO wave. The Petit Richon photo.
Ah, yes. The black triangle,
Yeah.
3 bright lights at the corners, dark sky behind it. That image was absolutely iconic.
It really was. It circulated everywhere. And for many people, this was it. This was the proof. Look, here's the object everyone's been describing.
Was it investigated? Did experts look at
Oh,
it?
absolutely. It went through the ringer. NASA looked at it. The French National Center for Scientific Research, even the Belgian Royal Military Academy. They all analyzed it.
What did they conclude? Fake. Real.
That was the strange part initially. None of them could definitively say it was a fake. They couldn't spot obvious signs of tampering, but they also couldn't positively identify what it was.
So ambiguous results.
Pretty much. There were concerns, of course. It was released anonymously, which always raises flags, but those concerns were kind of brushed aside by some. SOBEPS.
That's the Belgian UFO group, right?
Yes, the main one. They championed the photo. For 20 years, they basically claimed it was genuine evidence of the phenomenon.
20 years. That's a long time for a photo like that to be considered potentially real by a major UFO organization. What happened?
Well, the truth finally came out in 2011, quite dramatically, actually.
Oh, yeah.
The guy who took the photo, Patrick Marichal, went on Belgian TV, on RTL,
Right.
and he confessed the whole thing was a hoax.
A hoax. After all that time.
Yep. He said he just did it as a prank to fool his workmates. That was the entire motivation.
Wow, how did he even make it? It looked pretty convincing in the analysis, apparently.
He showed them how he did it. It was incredibly simple, almost disappointingly so. He took a piece of polystyrene foam, cut it into a triangle, painted it black,
No way.
stuck some flashlights on the corners for the lights, and then hung the whole thing up with a string to photograph it against the evening sky.
Polystyrene and flashlights. That's
Yeah.
kind of deflating, isn't it?
It really is. All that analysis, all the debate over a piece of painted foam. As Brian Dunning from the Skeptoid podcast pointed out, this one photo and its eventual debunking kind of became emblematic of the whole evidence situation for the Belgian wave. The most compelling visual turns out to be completely mundane.
That's a tough blow for the extraordinary phenomenon explanation. So if the best photo was fake, what about all those thousands of sightings? The police reports, the initial radar contacts? How did skeptics explain that?
Well, quite a few skeptical viewpoints emerged, especially as the lack of solid proof became more apparent. Back in 1992, Mark Hallett wrote a pretty critical essay, La vague ovni belge ou le triomphe de la désinformation.
The Belgian UFO wave, or the triumph of misinformation. Sounds pointed.
It was. He heavily criticized SOBEPS, accusing them of spreading misinformation and basically fueling the whole thing. His argument was that the wave was largely a mass delusion.
A mass delusion, like people convinced themselves they were seeing something extraordinary.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Amplified by media attention and, in Hallett's view, the work of groups like SOBEPS actively promoting the idea of unexplained craft. He brought up Philip Klass's ideas, too.
Remind me.
Klass argued that news coverage itself can trigger UFO waves. People hear about sightings, they start looking up more, maybe misinterpreting ordinary things, planes, stars, helicopters as UFOs, because that idea is now in their heads. And they report it, which leads to more news coverage. It becomes a self-feeding cycle.
A kind of psychosocial feedback loop.
Exactly. Hallett believes SOBEPS played a key role in kicking off and sustaining that loop in Belgium.
Were there other skeptical takes?
Yeah, in 1993, Pierre McGinn and Mark Remy wrote in Physicalia magazine. Their conclusion was similar in that they felt the wave was less a job for physicists looking for alien tech and more something for human scientists, psychologists, sociologists to study. Why did people report these things at this time?
Shifting the focus from the objects to the observers.
Precisely. And others tried to find more conventional explanations for specific reports. Renaud Leclerc and some colleagues published a paper arguing that, yeah, some sightings could simply be misidentified helicopters.
Right, like the Wave police report potentially suggested. But what about the silence? That was a key feature.
They addressed that. They suggested maybe engine noise was masked by, traffic on a nearby road, or maybe a strong wind blowing the sound away from the witness. Plausible environmental factors.
It shows how context matters in perception. What else?
Jean-Michel Abrissart has written quite a bit. He argued the start of the wave actually fits better with a psychosocial hypothesis than with Essobes's claims of genuinely novel events. He's continued to engage in debates about the evidence, or lack thereof.
And Brian Denning, you mentioned him regarding the photo. Did he weigh in on the F-16 incident too?
He did. He really highlighted the discrepancy between what SOBEPS reported claiming 9 solid radar locks on UFOs and what the Belgian military actually confirmed, which was, again, only 3 locks, all determined to be the F-16s locking onto each other.
Big difference between 9 mystery locks and 3 friendly fire locks.
Huge difference. And Dunning emphasized the Bragg's scattering explanation for the other radar contacts. He also made a crucial point about the timing of the reports. Remember those 143 reports after the March 30th incident?
Yeah.
They didn't all come flooding in spontaneously that night. They were collected over the following 2 weeks after intense media coverage and explicit requests from SOBEPS for people to report anything unusual they might have seen.
So the media attention might have prompted people to reinterpret things they saw, or maybe even misremember the timing.
That's the core of the psychosocial explanation Dunning puts forward. The media primes people, they reinterpret mundane things, they report them to the soliciting organization, and it looks like a huge wave of independent sightings when it might be something else entirely.
And the lack of photos. Beyond the fake one?
Dunning stressed that too. Thousands of sightings claimed over months. In 1989-1990, cameras weren't ubiquitous like smartphones today, but they existed. Yet almost no verifiable photographic evidence emerged. That lack, he argues, strongly supports the idea that people weren't seeing structured, unusual craft, but rather misinterpreting more common phenomena.
Was there ever any thought it could be, say, secret military aircraft? Maybe American stealth planes?
That was definitely considered. General Wilfried de Brouwer, who was the chief of operations for the Belgian air staff at the time, he initially wondered about experimental U.S. aircraft, maybe a stealth project being tested.
Plausible, maybe? Operating silently at night.
It sounds plausible, but they checked. The Belgian authorities asked the U.S., and the American authorities officially denied having any USAF stealth aircraft operating over Belgium during those specific time periods.
So another potential explanation ruled out.
Seems so, which leaves us with, well, a whole lot of reports involving credible people, even the military. But also a distinct lack of solid, unambiguous evidence. A famous photo that turned out to be a prank. And strong arguments for psychological factors, mass suggestion, and misidentification playing a major role.
It really is a classic case study, isn't it? It has all the ingredients: widespread reports, official involvement, mystery, a seemingly definitive piece of evidence.
That then collapses under scrutiny.
Right. It demonstrates how easily a narrative can build, especially around something as evocative as UFOs, and how difficult it can be to separate potential signal from noise, especially when dealing with eyewitness accounts after the fact.
Absolutely. The Belgium UFO wave really forces you to think about the reliability of perception, the power of suggestion, and how collective belief can shape our understanding of ambiguous events. Even when officials get involved, the answers aren't always clear-cut.
So maybe the enduring question isn't what were those triangular objects, but rather, why did so many people in that place and time believe they were seeing them? Thinking about that might tell us more about ourselves than about potential visitors from the stars. What do you think? How much does the collective excitement around a mystery influence what individuals believe they experience?
It's a critical question. The desire to believe, combined with ambiguous stimuli and media focus, it's a potent mix. The Belgian case suggests it can be powerful enough to create a nationwide phenomenon even without a single, concrete, unexplained object being definitively proven.
A sobering thought about observation and belief. That is the end of this episode. Until next time. Keep to the shadows. Some legends are best left undiscovered.